So thanks for joining. This is Terrius Bruce coming with another good conversation. Today I'm joined by my really good friend Paramita. Paramita, just tell us a little bit about yourself and anything you'd like people to know about
Okay, so my name is Paramita Choudhury, and I am an international graduate student in the University of Arkansas. I am doing my PhD here under Professor Peter Ungar in the Department of Anthropology. I came here from India, and I grew up in a city called Guwahati, and it is located in the northeastern part of India, and it is in the state of Assam. And my research is related to dietary reconstruction of post classic Mayans in the area of Yucatan Peninsula.
it. Can you tell us a little bit about the program that you're in?
Okay, so I'm in the Department of Anthropology, specifically biological anthropology, and they take in international as well as like lots of international students every year, and the program has been very, how to say, like, they have been very helpful, and they have provided me with all of the resources that I need to complete my PhD. The current head of the department, Dr. Plavkin, he does a lot of research on paleomorphology and primates. Most of the people in biological anthropology within University of Arkansas, they do a lot of paleoanthropology stuff. So during summers, they are mostly doing field work, and then they come back again to teach us, and we get to learn a lot of information regarding recent research work that's going on specifically in the African continent or in other parts of Europe. We have Professor Dr. Terhune who did a lot of research work in Romania. I'm not sure if she does that anymore. We have Professor Villasenor, who does a lot of work on paleoecology. We have Professor Delatine again, Professor Andar, doing dietary construction, primate stuff, and in the social anthropology, cultural anthropology, sorry, we have our Professor Erickson and Professor D. Elisera. I do not know a lot about their research, but they're really helpful and kind professors. The ones that you need,
Nice.
especially as an international student.
Gotcha. Okay. So, I love the fact that you dig us deeper in the history through archaeology. I love to understand a little bit more about like how does the study of ancient diets through archaeology contribute to our understanding of food and sustainable food systems today.
Okay, so sustainable food, when we talk about like sustainable food, it's not just something that is followed by people today. It was also followed by people in the past. For example, the ancient Maya, the ones that I'm studying. I'll be giving a lot of examples using ancient Maya because that's what I specialize in. They were able to create large water water management resources, where they would be able to reserve water during rainfall, because they didn't have any, like, in certain areas they didn't have like large rivers or secondary rivers even that would contribute towards agriculture. They did terrace farming and raised fields. They did soil enrichment techniques. For example, they would use, whatever was available to them at the time: leaves, straws, crop residues, that would help retain the moisture and reduce weed growth, add nutrients to the crops. They also did infield gardens. So there is an inland Maya site called Mayapan, and the time period is very close to Chichen Itza. So Chichen Itza might be like a popular site that most people know. The Chichen Itza was at its peak during the classical map periods, somewhere between say 500 to 980, and it's slowly, like slowly died down, and there were various reasons. But let's go to Mayapan. And in Mayapan, they had infield gardens. They had gardens in the city. So we are talking about a city that was cosmopolitan and that had people speaking different languages. They came in to work there, just like, big cities like New York, Boston, California. People move in from different parts because need jobs, and it's a diverse place. There's different benefits and opportunities in bigger cities. So Maipan was one of those cities, and it was populated. And they needed gardening spaces, so they would do a lot of kitchen gardening, infield gardens in the urban areas, and grow things like squash, beans, maize to some extent, various fruits. And they just tried they tried to keep it within control. But every civilization has its ups and downs, and there was a time when they had to move out of there, basically, because one of the reason being overpopulation and economic instability.
Do you think that change had an effect on them as well? Do you think they knew that change was coming? It makes me really think about the Cahokia and their advanced technology in agriculture as well. And I just always wonder. I mean, these civilizations, they left no history of why they just up and left. But I just wonder, do you think that maybe they knew climate change was happening even then?
Yeah, I think so. I think they did have an idea about what was going on, because they were pretty smart people. They knew math, they knew physics, as in, like, when it comes to astronomy. They could look into the stars, and they had ideas about what would be, how to say, what would be the position of the stars, or what the sun does to the earth. They knew very well about the environment they were living in, the ecology they were living in. They had the basically the ecology of that area did not give them a lot of options when it came to preserving food for a long time, or like annual harvests and such, because they had um they had karstic soil, and they
Mm,
had a rain forest like situation. So there might be floods, and there would be droughts. There would be decade long droughts. And it just did not happen
mm.
during the post classic period. It happened during the classic period. It happened now, like, there are some recent papers on climate change where they are talking about some. I'm trying to remember the name of the paper, but anyways, they talked about how there was like decade long droughts, and droughts like yearly droughts or 2 year 3 year combined droughts, that was kind of common. So they were trying to have a technology or have a dietary pattern wherein they could, like, they wouldn't have to think about their food or their lifestyle change every year. They did have trading systems, so if something was not available in their area, they were able to trade it with their partners somewhere in, say, Mesoamerica and the Gulf Coast. But they knew what was definitely going on. In fact, there was, I think, to say around 780, 900, there were droughts, specifically in the inland areas. So people moved away from those to the coastal areas. That did lead to some change in their diet, because maize cannot be easily grown in certain areas. So they had to
Right.
get those, um, like, transported to them.
how does the role of this traditional knowledge, and the practices that the Mayans and other civilizations, practice, how does it shape sustainable agriculture? And what are some examples that you would say from like archaeological findings?
Okay. So, I mean, since there's like in the Asian and Southeast Asian context, we can talk about the dry rice system that is very, very prevalent in China, Yangtze River, yeah, in the lower Yangtze region, and it displays somewhat of a really high yield, and it supports their large population in that area. There's dry rice cultivation. So we're talking about wet rice, dry rice cultivation in those areas. Places where, you cannot have wet rice, they develop some sort of dry rice cultivation, and it required much less labor compared to the wet rice. And it was adaptable to a variety of ecological conditions. There's something which I am not very very familiar with. It's the SRI system rice intensification. And I mean, you're an agriculture person, you know more about this than me, but
Yeah, it sounds like extremely climate smart. Like everything that you're saying about those systems, it sounds like they understood a climate smart solution well before it was called climate smart.
right. So going back to the system rice intensification. So it again, like it has like high yield and less water usage, improves the health of the soil. Talking about agroforestry, the Mayans used agroforestry. They used trees and somehow like integrated the trees to make sure that the crop crop was provided with multiple benefits, stabilize the soil, the ecology, and the biodiversity of the area. They had mixed cropping, intercropping system, which we still use nowadays. I can give you an example. So this is not archaeology. This is more historical. So I'm from northeastern India, and in certain parts of northeastern India, they use shifting cultivation.
Hmm.
Shifting cultivation, when used, the slash and burn cultivation technique. So slash and
Yes.
burn cultivation is all right when I think it's within like a limited amount of population. But as the population keeps on growing, and if you keep on slashing down multiple forests, I don't think it's really good for the environment that way. I might be wrong again. I'm not a really like an ecologist or an agriculture person, but I think back in the late 90s, there's the state called Arunachal Pradesh. Slash and burn cultivation was pretty prevalent. Government said that we will have to think about some newer methods that you guys can adapt to and just leave slash and burn completely.
Hmm.
People were not really happy about that because there are lots of different rituals which are attached to agriculture. Agriculture, like, yeah, it's part of our culture, and
Right.
you can't just decide to leave something because the government asked you to do so. So at the end, I think the solution was they were able to retain parts of their ritual, and slash and burn was not completely, people were still able to follow slash and burn, but they also had to use other agricultural techniques. Maybe I forgot, but I think they do have terrace cultivation and what do you call that? Crop rotation and other techniques, so that it will somehow make it okay for the tribes as well as the government.
That makes me think about the need for political sway or influence to I guess incorporate better practices. What are like some of the practices that you can kind of talk about, as far as politically, how important were some of these practices politically for, like your research, the Mayan civilization? How was play a factor into, their conditions and the things that they did to be more climate smart?
So you're talking about the Mayans?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the Maya region, it had like different climate variability and different periods of drought, fluctuating rainfall patterns, and that was like a big threat to the agricultural productivity and food
Mm,
security. The Mayan rulers were not like, I'm the emperor and I'm ruling over everyone.
sure.
They had hierarchy within the system. So there were some bigger kings and primary kings. Then there's secondary and then the tertiary. So there would be the primary king, maybe just not one. In different areas there were different large kings who would have, you know, um, secondary ones. Those secondary ones would have certain amount of responsibility, and then people lower than them. The primary kings, some I think around the classic, late classic, towards the terminal classic, post classic. So I'm talking about, uh, again, it comes to that 700, 800 AD.
Mm,
They wanted to be called themselves as the divine kings or the god kings. They took it upon themselves to help the people, obviously, because, if you are a god, you should be able to solve a lot of problems. There was extensive network of reservoirs that was created, cisterns, canals, to capture and store rainwater during the wet season. The water systems, they ensured that there was a steady supply of water during the dry season, and irrigation of crops obviously supported the need of the population. There's a famous one, it's in Tikal. I'm not been there, but I want to go and look at it. It's apparently a really large reservoir, and it was engineered to capture runoff um, from the paved surfaces and channel it towards the storage tanks, making use of the available water. In swampy lowland areas, the Mayans, they developed sort of raised fields
mm.
to manage the water level, prevent waterlogging.
Like you're like right in my mind because I was literally trying to think about like how in the world did these ancient Mayans manage water resources, because sustaining agriculture in like this type of semi-tropical environment has got to be challenging. You're answering like what I was thinking in my head, like how did they manage this water resource?
Right.
Could you go a
So
little bit more into that?
yeah, sure. So the raised fields, they were constructed by piling mud from the bottom of canals onto platforms, and this created elevated planting. The canals served both as drainage channels during the rainy season and resource for irrigation. So yeah, they did do a lot of work, and this not only made the, I would say, the primary kings or the big Maya kings more popular, and it also increased their divineness from the lens of the common people.
Yeah. Mm. That's like real leadership. When I think about this, I think about community, and it sounds like you are helping me with fill the gaps of what we need as a community to continue to move forward. We need proper leadership, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges that especially communities of color or BIPOC communities, they have challenges
Mhm.
having community leaders. Everybody is either too busy or they don't want to be the lead or be the head. They want to continue to collaborate with each other, but it tends to be a disconnect from leadership moving the community forward. And it sounds like we got to get back to being kings because that's the only way. When people see the authority and they see that there's like true adaptive leadership in place, then we can progress forward. But until then, we're kind of going to be just stuck behind. I think about what you're talking about is a Ghanaian principle that is called Sankofa, reaching back through your ancestry, through your history, and grabbing truths that are necessary to bring forward. And that's what's necessary. So I just wonder when all of this, comes together, what you're talking about ancient practices, right? And you're talking about how these practices are changing through all these different environmental conditions, how the climate has changed in these spaces to where we can dig into that ancient wisdom and information. So I wonder, we integrate, these insights that you're telling us about our past. How can we use this to integrate it into policy making to enhance more sustainable development moving forward? What are your thoughts on that?
So, like, whatever they did into present day situation, I think there's a lot we can learn from them and a lot that we can add into the policy making. Some of that obviously is like definitely coming from the field, from the evidence that we got, archaeological evidence that we got, or from the hieroglyphic evidence written down in most of the Maya sites. So we can get like concrete evidence of what was successful and what was not successful, what techniques that can be used, what are the techniques that can be used in I think back in the past, especially maybe around 700, 800, 980, or even during 1550, 80. There were some techniques, not everywhere, but some techniques that would not be useful. And because of drought, climate change, economic instability, a lot of people ended up dying. And that is something we can learn from, because we don't need to get into that severe situation now. People who have the power, they can design their policies using like various archaeological or historical resources. The farming techniques that they used worked for a long, long period of time. Cultural relevance is something very important to look into, because in present day society, nowhere in the world, or maybe in some islands, but at least like in bigger countries, we do not have a big homogeneous society. It's heterogeneous. It's all mixed up. So when making policies, especially related to people's lifestyle and livelihood, it's important to look into the culture of the different people that live within our society. So they need to incorporate traditional knowledge and adapt the cultural practices of the local communities, and that can bring in the community together. Archaeology teaches us about resilience, that people in the past, and I'm sure people even in the present day present day in different parts of the world face.
Mm.
There's droughts going on. There's how to say wars going on. Our humans are resilient. That's why like have been able to populate and integrate themselves in different parts of the world, and we're still living, unlike a lot of other primates, big apes, who are not existing and who are not in this world to the same extent as we are.
Mm.
We have to like, and policy should also be built based on conservation and biodiversity. So think about ancient land use management practices and support the agricultural forestry, the polyculture practices that were practiced by the people, by the maybe the ancient Mayan, the Mayan people who are still alive, or when we talk about Americans, the Native Americans of the past and the Native Americans who are still alive, they have lots and lots of different agroforestry practices. Maybe policymakers can look into that. There can be educational programs, especially for younger kids, because it's good to learn early. They can take in more information, they can absorb more information than we can. So make educational programs for people of maybe different generation, different age groups, that will teach them the practices, the traditional practices, and maybe fuse that with some modern technology so that they can absorb that information easily. I just like when I think about it, I think about so the Indus Valley civilization, which was like in the northwestern part of India, present day Pakistan, some parts of Afghanistan. And we're getting more and more information that it was like more spread around than what we already know. There was a site called Rakhi Gadi. And this we're talking about, say, 2000 BC, 1500 BC, 2500 BC, that time period. And they had like brilliant urban system, amazing planning, where the roads were paved and the drainage system was so amazing that even present day people who are like civil engineers who design modern day stuff, they say that there was no way these cities would have flooded at any point of time. But yes, drought was definitely going on. Drought, maybe multi-decadal drought or yearly droughts, that was a situation going on there. But they too had this water reservoirs, and there was like a big place called the Great Bath, and they had upper city, lower city. So those type of plannings were, like it's just what I'm trying to say is, if something comes from tradition does not mean that it is not adaptable in the present day society. Traditional knowledge, I mean, people back then do were able to think, and they were creative, and we have the same elements that they had. So maybe with some changes, we can just adapt it.
Yeah. Thank you for all of that. I think that going back to what we spoke about before, I think the biggest thing is, I have to just highlight again, is Sankofa. Not just the idea of going back and looking into history, but also to get and obtain information or something of substance and bring it back to the present. And, it kind of makes me think about like your field. When people listen to this, of all ages, they may think, why go back and look at the anthropology and the study of people, and the study of where we've come from. And why is it necessary? I can go back maybe a generation or two, and that's good enough. Why is it necessary to go deeper into history and time? And then what made you pursue becoming an anthropologist? And then, what is an
So, an anthropologist is a person who, like you said, studies humans from different time and space, different cultures. Wherever there is presence of human, an anthropologist exists, or anthropology exists there. So, suppose there is something called, this is within cultural anthropology realm, so I'm not like very knowledgeable about it, but there's something called visual anthropology, where anthropologists study people using photographs. So anthropology is related to everything that's human. Obviously there is difference between like archaeology within US, within the American education system. Archaeology is studied under the Department of Anthropology. In a lot of different countries, archaeology is a different department from anthropology. So maybe it is linked with history department, or in some places, I don't know, with Middle Eastern studies, and it could be a totally different department. Basically, that's what I'm trying to say. But here in the US, anthropology and archaeology are very interlinked. So my study is more interdisciplinary, and as to why I thought it would be interesting to study something from the past or culture of the past, is because the past always has a beautiful story. So you know for example, a lot of people nowadays do not want to know much about history, because like you said, what will we do by studying history? It's something in the past, it happened, there are lots of bad things that happen. But I think we forget that there's also a lot of knowledge that will be lost if we do not study that. For example, say, like I'm again bringing up Maya, but the trading system that existed, the extensive trading system that existed in within the Mayans and the other cultures in Mesoamerica, Central America, and the different things that they traded in is really amazing to study. Cocoa beans, we wouldn't have like chocolate cocoa spread over in different parts of, especially like South Central Mesoamerica, parts of North America, if that trading system did not exist. Jewelry, uses of gems, the very different types of corns that was produced, and that was like, shipped off to different parts just to get, because it was more or less a barter system to get something that they did not have. That maybe, in a normal good time where we have lots of crops and we have a lot of cultivation that's going on, that's growing, is really, we don't really think about it much. But imagine a situation where when the Spanish came over, the conquistadors, they put on a lot of restrictions on these people,
Right.
and that led them to restrict their movements. If these people, they were able to go and hunt to far off lands and maybe get deers and turkeys and peccary and all of that, that was restricted, that was limited, so they could not go there. It was not like, they just suddenly put on animal protection laws. They just put on laws, or they just put on rules and restrictions where people cannot move, so they have to eat whatever is available within their area, or whatever tastes similar
That's right.
within that area. So that changed a lot of the game items that they used to hunt. They went for maybe, instead of peccaries, they went for some other sort of bird. Their whole system was restricted, and they could just, eat things that was available to them within that restricted area. So their diet changed, and this was mostly around, I would say, 1500, 1600, pre-colonial and post Maya, some certain Maya region collapse. They were still able to manage through all of those difficulties. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how many of you know this, or maybe like a lot of people might not have any idea, but food, if there's like, because we have plenty of supplies, we do not have any issues nowadays for the most part. But if there's, taxes, or there's restrictions on food, that causes a lot of issues. So I can give you an example, because India was under the British rule for maybe like 150, 200 years. And they put salt tax. And if anyone had ever had Indian food, we like salt. Almost everyone likes salt in their food. Paying for just those basic items, or having restriction on something, makes your life really difficult, changes your mood, maybe stresses you out, because food, like, the basic things of life: food, clothing, and shelter. So clothing and shelter, fine, you have the two-third, but if one-third of the two-third gets disbalanced, that can rack up a lot of problem in your life.
Right.
So, maybe like there were like those reasons, and wanted to learn more about traditions of various cultures. So yeah, I thought, taking up this topic for my research, PhD research, would be interesting. Plus, I love stories.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about
Storytelling,
story.
reconstructing stories, learning about the different massive structures in architecture.
I think that's why I enjoy talking to you so much and talking about story maps, because you like stories and I like stories as well. And I think that learning about a people through their stories that their people share, like it gives us almost like a front row seat to their story. And I think that's why it's important to have these types of conversations so that communities can be able to share their stories. That way, generations after them will be able to understand and appreciate the authenticity of what's really happened in that space.
You're right. So, for example, when I went to collect data for my study, I study teeth. And I think I have not said that before. But we make impressions of teeth and then we put them under profilers and study them, scan them to get an idea of the texture of food that they had. You can also use the technique of isotope analysis, wherein you can study the amount of, I mean, like, not you will be studying it yourself, you will have to give it to the lab, and the labs will find out the amount of carbon, nitrogen, strontium, oxygen amount in the food, and they will also look into the ratio of that, tell you the amounts. So without digressing from the topic, we can't exactly know what, for example, I cannot tell you if they were having pizza, but I can tell you that maybe they were eating something that was soft, or they were eating something that was a little bit rough, or maybe something that had a mix of that. They had something that had amounts of, I don't know, cheese, amounts of spinach, protein, meat. So that can be said, and that brings a whole lot of sense as to why someone might be behaving, or like, I can also tell if someone is from that certain region or that person is an outsider, traveled to that region. How do we tell that, okay, there was a lot of trade going on? So obviously you will have to look into the presence of transportation techniques. Maybe you find some marine routes, maybe you find some ports, docks, you find shipbuilding areas, or you can also look into the diet. It will tell you if that person was from here or from outside. The amount of strontium present in someone's diet and the atmospheric strontium will tell that, yes, this person was having exactly the same type of food that we are having. Everyone's having pizza, or one person is having maybe double cheeseburger and this person's just having pizza.
Yeah, but wouldn't it be like cool if in your research you could say, I know this was pizza. Like there's no way any other ingredient, this was pizza that they were eating. You're the first finder of pizza in Central America.
It would be great, but I think, for that we would need hieroglyphics. So there's obviously hieroglyphic evidence that people can read and say, okay, we're just using pizza as a term. Say they were eating some sort of food that had a lot of shrimp in them, or they were eating deers, or whatever is written. So that's written evidence, and written evidence is like, yeah, this is exactly that. But if you have to find out from their bones and collagens and their teeth, then we get just the texture or the ingredients, not the exact.
Okay, so based on your findings, what type of diets did they have? Were they on a paleo diet, if you would say? Were they really deep into lots of meat? Were they high vegetable, nuts, and fruit diets? And what were they eating more or less?
It was like, I would say it was varied. It just varied from one place to the other. So they definitely were eating a lot of squash, beans, maize, especially within the inland areas, not in the coastal areas, because maize does not grow that well in coastal areas. They had different types of beans, squash, some sort of like variety of squashes again, fruits, vegetables, cacao, avocado, guava, papaya, that grows easily in tropical areas. Cacao was big part of it. Cacao was also used as a unit to sell trade products, peppers, chili peppers. nuts, bread nut, palm nuts, and obviously animal protein. They were
Mm.
hunting. They had white-tailed deer. There's also the rabbits and birds, turkeys, peccaries. They had dogs as pets in certain areas, and they also used to hunt dogs in certain places if they did not have enough food. Fish, different types of fish, catfish, rays, shellfish, turtles, domesticated turkeys, then have the turkey meat, foraged various types of berries, wild berries, vegetables, amaranth, uh, wild plants. And I think amaranth is something that grows in Arkansas because I had amaranth once or twice and it is like delicious. So yeah.
Yeah, and it sounds like, going back to sustainable agriculture and how people should figure out what to grow in their modern places, whether they live in an apartment or they live in a duplex or a house or on a large ranch.
Hmm.
It's
Yep.
all based on what's good for you in your area. Sometimes it just makes sense what grows best there in your climate and use what you have. So indigenous knowledge shows us to use what you have and not try to bring invasive species of plants to grow things out of their climate or out of their normal natural state of being.
Yeah, I mean, for example, if you're living in, I don't know, downtown New York and you're trying to grow a coconut plant, a coconut plant, that's not going to work. And you cannot start being upset about that. Or say, I don't know, you just, like you said, people have to be very conscious about where they're living and their ecology. And there are so many undiscovered um flora and fauna, especially, I don't know, like, as a country as big as United States has so much land that has not been explored. So there is a lot, even wherever you live in the community, there might be some things which are good herbs for you, some places, some fruits, some berries that are edible. I usually go by the fact, for the most part, that if something is really edible by birds, animals, like squirrels, maybe you can eat part of it and be alive.
True. Like just the other day, I was foraging, so I was walking through the park and just enjoying, and I happened to see some elderberry. And most people don't even pay attention to it, but I've grown elderberry, so I kind of, have an eye for it, and I like to see when the stem starts to turn like this very purple red, and then it automatically, when my eyes connect to it, and once you see one, you see more just shooting everywhere. So
Yes.
I just start foraging, and it's like I think that it's not so much that people don't know. I mean, the knowledge is key, but I think that we have learned to associate green lawns with what we should be doing, and anything that's not a thing of grass, we see it as a weed. But it's like it's
Yes.
not. Generally, it's some type of herbs or natural things that are there. But we, again, going also back tying into the knowledge, indigenous knowledge, we don't understand what things are and how to use them. That's why it's
Mm-hmm.
important for us to go back and talk to like our older relatives and community members and figure out what they know. Take the time to talk to them and see if there's some plant identification. Plus, using the technology, it's too many tools out that we can take a picture and say, hey, what is this? And then figure out its uses. But, being able to have like conversations like this and share that knowledge is important because it continues to advance us and move us forward.
Exactly. Amongst Native Americans, from what I read, is they were very, very conscious about their environment and where they lived in. They knew what herbs were near them, and were able to create medicines that that might help them fix something without going through surgery. So I think it's very important to have that type of knowledge. And also sometimes I think, like, I don't know, I have seen some people be in the way where if there's an older person and they try to share knowledge. Younger generation is usually like they're old, they might not know much as we know, or their technology is like it's not as good as ours, so we know much better.
Mm.
So you have to stop thinking like that.
Yeah, that's so unfortunate. It's like it also makes me think about how Europeans came to these countries that they colonized, and they
Mm-hmm.
threw out the old people and their knowledge, and they saw it as
Mm-hmm.
unfit for their knowledge, right? And that's how
Exactly.
we get like our classical institutions now. That's not inclusive of this indigenous knowledge. No, they don't see it fit as science. But
Exactly.
these people have been gauging in STEM, science, education, science, engineering, technology, and math through everything they've been doing. And I think food is a great way to highlight how they've done this. They've constructed
Mm-hmm.
so many things, and we see so much past knowledge through even your work that shows that these are scientists that are cultivating these things for their communities given the times. I think that a lot of those tools and those bits of knowledge are lost. We don't give it its proper due. We see it as just something in the past, something old, and we believe that we have the best technology because it's what we're learning in present day. But when we find out that when you engage with these practices, that there's a lot of wisdom in what older people have to say because they don't just have the information. They have tried and proven experiences that say, I tried that you're talking about, hey, this doesn't work that way. You have to do it this way. And it's important for us to have these relationships through all generations, and not just, people who are our age, but younger youth, like you spoke about, as well as, older, elderly citizens that are in our community. So that way we'll be able to share knowledge with them, but also receive wisdom and knowledge from them.
Exactly.
Now that you've done this research and you're getting your degree, how do you see yourself using the knowledge that you have and the skills and technical know-how you have to change our world moving forward?
I mean, there is, especially with the present day situation where social media is such a big thing. I think spreading awareness or spreading knowledge is not really difficult, is someone, if someone really wants to do it,
Mhm.
if it is their priority. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do, because I do want to maybe train people in a way where maybe I teach them about whatever I have learned, but also, I don't know, maybe do some writing, because I'll be working on publishing some papers, and maybe, I don't know, write books on these, whatever I have learned. Uh, but it is like, I think it is important that, for me at least, whatever, especially like if maybe spread this information in a way where people do not have to spend a lot of money to be able to get it. So I don't really know what I'm going to do right now, but maybe do something like make videos on these.
Hmm.
But yeah, that's something I'll have to think about. Maybe even like, share this information where it can reach the masses, somehow work with the government in a way. There's different ways nowadays. Spread it through Twitter, make Twitter posts. So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I see who you are and the resources that you bring as so valuable. I think that when people listen to this, there will be communities that will want to reach out to you and say, hey, we want to understand how our connection ties to the past. Who are our people? What is the story we have to tell and share so we move on, move forward? So how can people reach out to you? How do they connect with you?
I'm available in LinkedIn, and I don't know, maybe you can share my email
Hmm.
with email link somehow through this video in the
Okay.
description. So yeah, if someone wants to reach out to me and have some questions regarding maybe the University of Arkansas Department of Anthropology, or the PhD program here, anything related to whatever we talked about, dietary reconstruction and stuff, I'll definitely be happy to help out.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. Do you have any questions or any thoughts, final thoughts that you'd like to ask me or share?
I think whatever you are doing is amazing. And I really liked talking with you about this because it felt like a good free flowing conversation where, you had this questions, and you are someone who is so much knowledgeable regarding sustainable agriculture. So this was definitely like something that I was a little bit scared about. What am I going to talk about agriculture? Maybe this is going to be wrong or that's going to be wrong, but no, you made me feel really good, and thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you. And one thing that a lot of people don't know, and which is like the last thing I want you to share and talk about, is your love and passion for the arts, the dance, the gymnastics, the everything that you do that I guess aligns you with your purpose and your movement through life. If you briefly kind of just share a little bit of your background of your spiritual practice, if you like to share, but then also just your movement and your connection to the arts.
Okay, so briefly, I didn't think you would bring this up. Uh, so I have been involved with classical dance when I was, I think, I started dancing before I went to school. So I was around maybe 2 years, 6 months when I first went to a dance school. It is called Bharatanatyam, and it is an Indian classical dance form. India has 8 classical dance forms so far. And I was very, very interested in dancing. I wasn't very interested in learning how to do classical dance. I just wanted to dance because classical, anywhere you go, classical has a lot of discipline, and I didn't have that. But then I went through it. A few years later, I changed my dance form and I was trained under Kathak dance. And I have been performing since then. So my connection with dance is a long relationship, you can say. I did gymnastics for not as many years as dance. So I did gymnastics for, I can say, maybe I started when I was like in grade 5, and I continued doing it until I was like 19, 20 years old. So I did it for quite a while. I was able to compete in even sub-national, national level. That goes my gymnastics. But this is like I was trained in classical vocal music by my mother. She was a professional singer. So it was something I have been linked with in Indian arts, music, and traditional classical music, dance, art, and all of that for a long time. And somehow it never felt like I was, pressured into it. This was something that
Mm.
just genuinely I care for, and I love languages a lot. I like learning languages. I like speaking different languages. That, like language itself talks about someone's culture, what different words. For example, uh, I forget the name of the tribe. Maybe it's the Maui. I forgot the name of the tribe, but there is a certain tribe. They are cattle herder, and apparently almost 60% or 70% of their vocabulary is related to rain, because somehow it's the connection of the rain, the feed for the cattle, the maintenance of the cattle, and it all relates to each other. And that's why so many words. So I think, like every language, depending on the words that you speak, you can understand their culture a little bit.
I think this is why you are so connected to anthropology and cultures because, again, I don't think that passion of the arts ever left. It's how you connect to the stories that connect back to you, because I think that's your entertainment. I think that's like a part of probably why you like the types of movies and the types of things. Everything, it all connects.
Yes, I think so too. I think so. I mean, like, if there is a book that has some sort of historical background, I'll definitely read that book. I
Yeah,
mean,
I'm
again,
with
it
it.
depends though. It depends. It's like I like mostly like ancient history, civilization, medieval history to some extent, but there's so much conflict involved that it gets stressful.
Yeah, I feel that. Well, I appreciate you, and I hope you have a great day and a great weekend and all that. And whenever I get back to Arkansas, we'll chat.
Yes, thank you so much, and I definitely enjoyed doing this.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All
Thank you
right,
so
take
much.